We are living in a computer-programmed reality, and the only clue we have to it is when some variable is changed and some alteration in our reality occurs. We would have the overwhelming impression that we were reliving the present, deja vu, perhaps in precisely the same way, hearing the same words, saying the same words. I submit that these impressions are valid and significant, and I will even say this: such an impression is a clue that at some past time point a variable was changed, reprogrammed as it were, and that because of this an alternative world branched off.
Good morning and welcome to the Friday edition of Free Association Radio, also known as the Friday Farcast. My name is Robert Phoenix. I'm your host, and today I will have a very special guest on in about 5 minutes or so. Right now I've got some issues with the chat room, and I'm wondering why nobody is in there. This is unusual. Let me just quickly, oh, there they are. There's everybody. We've got 3 guests. Hello, guests. Gemini's son is there. Guests. 12406, 12410, 12416. Welcome to the show. All right, we're live. We're kicking. We're real time in the chat room. Anyway, today's guest is none other than George Green, and I'm sure a number of you have heard him before on Coast to Coast AM with Art Bell and George Norrie. He's been a semi-frequent guest on there for quite a while. And today's Janet's birthday, isn't it? That's why she's not here. Well, happy birthday, Janet. George has been a semi-frequent guest on the show. And I first ran across George back in 1990. Hey, everybody wish Janet in there happy birthday, will you? Give her a birthday wish while you're in the chat room with her. Janet, who runs my chat room, it's her birthday today. I want to say happy birthday to her. So, anyway, I first ran across George Green in 1990 when I was living in Olympia, Washington. And it was a very interesting time in my life. It was the start of the Sunday. Well, Janet, they can wish you a happy birthday today, right? Because they're not going to see you on Sunday, right? Sorry. So just wish her happy birthday anyway. It's okay. It's okay. Sorry, Janet. I was getting an early plug-in. I have a lot on my mind these days. You should be grateful at least that I'm thinking ahead of time. All right. So anyway, let's get to the business at hand. I met George Green in 1990 when I was having an explosion of consciousness at that time. It was like I was getting a big dump, a big download. And it was at the time of the first Gulf War. It was like there was like an alarm clock going off inside of me. And all of a sudden, I was experiencing massive synchronicities and major downloads of knowledge and all kinds of crazy stuff. And there were 2 people that swung through Olympia probably within about a year of each other. The first was Bill Cooper. And maybe I'll talk to George about Bill Cooper a little bit later in the show. And then the second was George himself. And I saw George at I think it was a small convention space in this hotel downtown. There must have been about 200 people in the room, so there was a great deal of interest in what George was saying. And then I circled back with George when a copy of the Handbook for the New Paradigm came into my possession. I think it was around 1998 or 99. I was absolutely riveted by the material in that book and could not stop reading because of the depth and what felt like true authenticity. And I'd read, quote unquote, a lot of channeled works before, and I have a pretty good inner sense as to what sticks and what doesn't. And Handbook for a New Paradigm, at least the first edition, the first copy, the first booklet, the only one I ever had, that one stuck to me in a very big way. And it's still absolutely resonant. And I think that some of these scenarios that are talked about in the Handbook for the New Paradigm, we're staring down right now with our global situation unfolding at breakneck speed. So let's try to get up to speed on that. And without any further delay, let's bring on the man himself, Mr. George Green. Hello, George.
Good morning.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing good, sir.
Great. Well, thanks for calling in. I appreciate it, and taking time out with me and the folks that listen to my show. And George, I just want to sort of try to get up to speed as quickly as possible and really stare down and take advantage of the time that we have here today to talk about kind of what's happening globally. But I didn't really get to the part where, I was, kind of delving into your background a little bit, your connection with the Carter administration, your relationship to sort of the inner workings of government at kind of a fairly intimate level. And I'm just wondering if you could share just a kind of a brief synopsis of your background so that people can understand the sense of legitimacy in some of the insider positions that you've been able to take over the years.
Well, the best way to look at it, Robert, when I was younger, because of my dad's business, he was in the meat business, and I learned all about factoring paper. In other words, accounts receivable, because my dad would, go out and buy a carload of cattle, and the laws were that if you bought them cattle from the farmer, you got to pay for it in 24 hours. Well, when he processed the cattle, he turned around and we had contracts with the government, so we sold it to the government. But the government doesn't pay right away, Robert. So what happened is that we had tremendous receivables, and my job was to take the accounts receivables from the government and go pledge it at the banks. So I went up and down the street in Denver on 17th Street to every bank, and I borrowed the limit. That's what you could do, because I had so-called blue chip paper. Because we were doing such tremendous volume. I mean, it was the third biggest packer in Denver, to give you an idea.
Wow.
So what happened is that at the point when I was there, I had a couple of the bankers came in. They said, we'll loan you more money, but we need more deposits in our account. So I said, well, what do you need? And they said, well, if you give us another $1 million, we can loan you a lot more. And he says, you got a lot of friends with money. Just have them deposited in our account. So then he explained to me how the franchise, the Federal Reserve System works. And basically what happens, if I put $1 million in the bank can loan out $10 million. They just create $10 million out of thin air. It has nothing to do with the government. They just do it. Well, I said, well, how much more money do you want? And I said, let's make a deal. You're advertising right now full-page ads in the papers to put money in, and you're offering people television sets and all that. Why don't you just pay me a percentage, and I'll get a bunch of my friends to put money in your bank? So he said, that's good. Anyway, we arranged on a deal where the bank would pay me 3% of all the deposits. In other words, if you had $10,000, Robert, I would write out a check to you, actually, for 2%. I kept 1% for my fee. Uh-huh. So I write out a check to you for $200 in advance. And then you'd put your money into the bank, whatever one I told you. It was FDIC insured, and it was like $10,000, which was the limit at that time. But anyway, I had so many people that heard about me because all of a sudden the yield from the CDs at that time was about 5%. But by giving you 2% more, that's like 40% increase without any risk.
Right.
Well, you were a loudmouth, Robert. You were on the radio, and you told everybody else about me. So I had millions of dollars coming into my bank, into my office. And I also had the banks calling because all of a sudden I got a new framework where they could, keep within the rule book of what they can do. And then we were providing fresh funds, basically moving it from other banks. Well, I got so powerful because at the end of 1 year, when your certificate came up for renewal, because you put it in for a 1 year certificate of deposit, who did you call to renew it? You called me, but I had nothing to do with the bank.
Right.
So what would happen if the bank didn't pay me? What would happen is we would jerk it out, and I'd move all the money that I had in that bank into another bank. Well, the bank had already loaned money against all that under the rules. So guess what would happen? Either FDIC had to take the bank over, or the Federal Reserve advanced money. Well, I became pretty powerful. So what happened is then the Federal Reserve itself told the state of Colorado that I had to get licensed, and I said, fine, give me a license. So unfortunately, as we're sitting with the state and going over all the details, they didn't have one. So that was because the problem is what is money? And
right.
I says, well, if that's a problem, I said, I have friends in Washington. I'll just get the accounting book for the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. And it's about the size of a typical phone book, about 3 inches thick.
Right.
And I said, when I get it, I'll go over all the details so we can determine what you're going to give me a license on. So I got it. And, Robert, when I got through opening up what the definition of money, they don't have one. I mean, seriously. So that really opened up the Pandora's box. I said, well, with the state, I said, how are you going to give me a license based on these numbers? I said, if your listeners want to get a copy of that, just have them call me. My 800 number, 729-4131. I'll send them the sheet so they can see what the definition of money according to the World Bank is, which is kind of interesting. At any rate, when I got through doing this, the state says, well, we've got to figure out some other way. And I said, well, let's just analyze this. What is money? It's some kind of a security. And they said, yeah, that's correct. So I said, let's just give me a securities license. And they said, but what you're doing, you have to be an underwriter or a principal. And I says, bring it on. I have a background. I went to Colorado School of Mines. I studied engineering. I went to University of Illinois, and I studied law and business. And so it was not a big problem about me for exams because I kind of liked them.
Right.
I says, well, let's go on from there. And then they gave me the gave me the books necessary for studying for the exam. So I read all the books, and I said, my God, reading the fine print on all this stuff, being a securities broker is a license to steal.
Huh.
And, well, anyway, I took the exam, and I became a registered financial principal with the NASD and an underwriter. And I had a company going for about 20 years. But the primary, when I got involved with being an underwriter, because I look around, a lot of people wanted money for their investments and everything, so I became an underwriter of companies that's issuing the stock. And then I found out how phony that was. And I'll explain that to you. Let's say I had 1 million shares of stock that I issued, and we'll just say $1 arbitrarily.
Right.
And the company gets started, they wanted their money, and so my arrangement says I got a percentage of that. But in order to be a market maker, I had to have other brokers work with me. Well, they love new stocks, right? Maybe you've heard about that, the IPOs or initial public offerings.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, so what happened is that I issued a stock, and everybody's got a new one, and the first thing they do is they call all these people that they have on their list and say, we got a new hot item, and everybody out here thinks they're going to get rich. So that's the gambling casino, and that's basically what the stock market is.
Right.
Well, anyway, and it's only traded between brokers. The brokers are out here making money on somebody else's money, aren't they? They're just trading stocks.
Right.
That's all they're doing.
Yeah.
Now, what happened is the stock market dropped, like it did this last year for us and what it's doing to a lot of people.
So what year were we talking about, George?
Well, this was all during the 60s, frankly.
Okay, good. So
anyway, what happened, the next game happened was that I started looking at all of this stuff, and one day the stock market dropped about 20%.
Right.
And what happened is, I started looking. I said, wait a minute, I was the underwriter of the company, so I knew what it was worth. And my job as an underwriter was to maintain a market. If I couldn't maintain the market, my other brokers, that was it. They had to sell the stock. Well, if you know the stock's not worth anything, why would you buy it?
Right.
So, but that was my job. So I started analyzing this thing, and then there's something wrong with this picture because the day when this market dropped, the next day I got a letter from the Federal Reserve said they'd loan me all the money to maintain the market. In other words, they didn't care what the market did. I'd have all the access to money to maintain it myself. Well, you have bank lines. I had money at the bank. I could borrow money, whatever I wanted to, against the securities from the bank, but the Federal Reserve itself bypassed the banks. That'll put up a big red flag to me.
Right.
And so what happened is I called my other buddies and I said, we're dealing with a stacked deck of some kind, because why is the Federal Reserve willing to loan money to maintain the market? So anyway, after analyzing this thing with my other buddies, I just shut my firm down. Within a week, the Federal Reserve then set up their own deal. They call it the Plunge Protection Team. The Plunge Protection Team are 8 members that are members of the Federal Reserve. They're on the floor of the U.S. Stock Exchange right now.
Right.
And their job is to maintain the market. In other words, to keep it going. They can manipulate it up and down.
Sure.
Now, at the same angles, what had happened is I decided at this minute to pull my money. They were upset with me because I controlled the banks across the country, so they just sent a letter to every bank in the United States not to do business with me. So I moved all the money into the S&Ls, the savings and loans at that time.
Oh, boy.
And then, however, Silverado Savings, which is a big one with the Bushes, were involved with.
Right.
At that point, they were there, and I'm down there with the president and some of them examining all the stuff that's going on. I said, wait a minute. And so what happened is when the S&Ls went down, they took all the assets from the savings and loans in the United States and sold all the real property, the receivables and everything.
Yeah.
And they sold them for about 25 to 30 cents on the dollar.
Wow.
To the inside guys. And
Right.
then the American taxpayer picked up the difference.
Wow.
Well, during that same time, because I knew what the hell was going on, what did they do? They invited me to a meeting up in Aspen, and of course, when I got into the meeting up there, the world leaders were there, and that's when they asked me to be the finance chairman for the election of the next president of the United States.
Which is right?
Well, that was Jimmy Carter. But let me tell you the whole story, because it gives you more an understanding of what's happening. When I walked into the room and I said, "What am I here for?" and they said, "We want you to be the finance chairman for the next president." Prior to that, I was volunteering just as a game, going out, and they made me president of companies, and we'd liquidate them. So they always need a figurehead. You see, that's kind of like what Washington is. You need a figurehead out there, and they're all being controlled.
Right.
Well, anyway, of course, my question was, who's going to be the next president? And they said, Jimmy Carter. And I said, Jimmy who? And they said, well, he's the Democratic governor of Georgia. And I said, but I've been voting Republican. And Paul Volcker walks over and says, son, don't worry about it. We control them both. Well, I knew that, but here I got it, directly in spades from Paul. And then, of course, he and I flew back on the same plane, believe it or not, from Aspen into Denver. And, I was talking to him, and he just said, I said, you're the most powerful man in the world. And he said, no, I'm just the front man. Again, another front man out there, right? Right. So currently, you don't hear about it, but Paul Volcker's right back up at the top again. Now, Paul's 80 years old. You know that. So they always protect their inside group that will follow the game that they're playing with the money. Yeah. Meanwhile, the world money situation is in such turmoil at this second. Yeah. That the Bank of International Settlements over there is basically stopping everything. I just come back from Europe. You can't use the dollar anywhere, and they won't use MasterCard or Visa either unless you have the new chip in it. Really? Yeah, well, that's planned. Under the new FEMA rules, you probably heard this week that FEMA now is actually looking for people willing to be volunteers to come in to man the FEMA camps. Now, that's this week. Now, this is
this is where we really enter into the real-time madness with what's going on with Europe financially and SB 1867 and the FEMA camps. This is a great point of departure. So they've just opened this up. They're actually also looking for long-term employment in these things. What more can you tell us about that, George?
Well, 10 years ago, I was asked if I would build. I had a contract to build an enemy prisoner war camp in downtown Las Vegas. Uh-huh. And I have a copy of the contract. I actually printed it. Again, your listeners I can get a copy to them. Anyway, what it says on the thing, it says enemy, and I said, wait a minute, who is the enemy? And then I started talking to the FEMA people, and they were telling me what's coming up. In case of a national emergency, this is what will occur. People will have to go to the post office and register, and at that time, the post office will get all of their necessary information that they get from you, and you're going to get the new debit card. Now, the new debit card is going to be your money card. That'll be your ID card. It'll have your picture. It'll have all your medical records and everything else. It's similar to the one that's already in force in Europe. Uh-huh. In other words, You pull it up, and all of a sudden everything comes up. They'll be able to identify you. Now, my CIA friends, the three-letter agency, we were talking about it because the card has a chip in it, and we were talking about putting chips in people, biblically or whatever they're talking about doing.
Yeah.
But they're not going to do that because there are going to be too many people dead in the streets. Well, the Plan 2000, the Jimmy Carter put in, and I sat in a couple of meetings on that. The Plan 2000, as Kissinger says, the number one problem on the planet is we have too many people.
Right.
So what they have set up to get a war started in the Middle East in the year 2000. Why do you think the Bushes at all were bombing the hell out of the Middle East in the year 2000?
Yeah.
That's to get World War III started.
Yeah.
Well, right, they're way behind schedule, obviously. We're on top of it. They wanted to have their program done by the year 2012. Well, that's next year.
Right.
Well, there's going to be have to be a lot of stuff done. I don't think they're going to be accomplishing it during the period of time they have, but they certainly get in the United States to the position where we're going to be rounded up, and you're going to see the total collapse of our economic system.
Well, let's take a step back and let's talk about Europe for a second, because there's a lot happening there. We've basically seen two military juntas take place in Greece and Italy, having their quote-unquote leadership deposed, and now you've got a leadership that is essentially agreeing to every line item of the austerity measures that are being presented without any sort of pushback. So we're seeing now Europe being reshaped before our very eyes. Merkel comes forward with Sarkozy and essentially says, hey, let's put all of our currencies together. No more sovereign banking, no more sovereign debt. Let's link our currency and have one major currency. Of course, Wall Street theoretically does, cartwheels. Market goes up today. Where are we now with all that, George? And besides having the card with the chip, what does this mean for Europe and the United States geopolitically?
Well, what it really means is they're collapsing over there too. Everywhere I went. When I went over to the McDonald's, for instance, it was $18 for a McDonald's, and they charge you extra for the ketchup.
Wow.
All of Europe is in such financial upside down. To the UK, and of course Germany has the power because they're a big industrial community. The rest of the countries are just been living off of the laurels of it. But the trouble is with the economy that's happened, you get ready. The plan, the only thing that they have left right now is to get the war started in the Middle East. You're probably aware that Israel right now, all the citizens over there are practicing daily right now for nighttime, going into their house and stuff. But I'm looking for to get a war started. And when they're going to get this plan to get all of Europe united on some new currency, that's kind of like the Federal Reserve, a new currency we're going to use.
Right.
The United States, we're not going to. They printed the new currency in the United States, but they're not distributing it.
Right.
What they're doing is they're getting ready because 94% of all the money is all digits, so they're going to give everybody this debit card. I don't see them issuing the money very quickly.
Right.
Because it's just not going to be there. It costs them 3 cents to make a penny, just to give you an idea. It's crazy in the world, but people out here are so asleep in the United States. The plan, of course, is to reduce the population in the United States down to less than 20 million. And that's the estimates that they had. Yeah. Well, that's part of, what the global, the Georgia Guidestone said, down to 500 million on the entire planet.
Right.
Well, I don't see the Middle East, I don't see Europe staying together at all. I see, just like us, do you think we're going to pass any of these bills or austerity things that they have by the end of the year? I think Congress is going to quit next week and go home for Christmas.
Right.
And that'll put more people out of work. Well, they're already out of work, but they've been drawing on some kind of unemployment benefits. Well, they won't get those anymore. Meanwhile, Social Security is in the general fund, and that's all borrowed out, and it's upside down. Right. And the only people buying the our federal bonds right now is the Federal Reserve itself. In other words, it's advancing more debt.
Right.
And so,
go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, let's go to the situation in Europe. And I ran all the way. I was in 5 countries, and everywhere we looked at the same thing. Belgium is okay because it's kind of the center up there, but it's tremendously expensive. It's just unbelievable how they can even exist compared to what we have over here. We got a freebie deal going on at this minute.
Right.
Meanwhile, in order to stabilize the world, we got to get a war going. That's all. So what do you think China and Russia are doing this week?
They're mobilizing.
That's exactly right. They put it all down in big time. In fact, they've announced that if we go, China will not hesitate to protect Iran even with the Third World War.
Right. I've read that. So let's just break down some of the hot spots. We've got Iran, which I think is it's a significant Rubicon. Syria is another hot spot, a less significant Rubicon, but very, very strategic in terms of its coastal access, relationship to Turkey, flyover space for refueling, all that stuff. And then you've got some interesting things happening in North Africa, specifically in the Sudan, which is, you've got Northern Sudan and Southern Sudan, the United States recognizing Southern Sudan, Chinese heavily vested in Sudan infrastructure. Where do you think the hot spot is really going to ignite and take off?
Well, it has to be Israel because that was the plan.
Yeah.
I'm not saying, and I think the plan is to hit Israel. I could say all bets are off when the bomb hits Israel. Now, understand Israel's got 3 million people. There's not a lot of them there.
Right.
But the problem is that the game, that was the original program to get it started, and that will begin World War III because at that point Israel's going to hit into Iran, which is loaded with nuclear anyway from China, Russia and China.
That's right.
I mean, Russia was running the Ramallah oil field in Iraq, and they provided all the nuclear stuff for Iraq when they were up there. You can't tell me that these countries that have the nuclear stuff are just going to sit back. Now, we have to understand that they're having troubles in Russia also, but they have a tremendous military capability. And when I was in Beijing with the leaders over there, and the military told me, look, it's 5,000 years, it's our turn to run the world.
Wow. Interesting.
And I'm sitting there, okay. And they told Obama, they said, you don't know how many nuclear bombs we have. And, of course, you've read about that submarine that they tried to identify that just practiced with a missile out of Los Angeles on up there.
Right.
And they see Chinese submarines on the East Coast. Well, there's Russian ones on both coasts, too.
Right.
Their Russian submarines are 2 football fields in length, 5 stories tall. They go 80 miles an hour underneath the water. With their stealth technology, they're undetected. And their targets are all the major cities on both coasts. So
there is a school of thought, George, that says, well, they're all in on the game together, and they're all doing this, kind of shadow play, and it's all being acted out, for our benefit. And really, there's just a lot of dirty handshake deals going on, saying, we're going to play the bad guy this time. Let's just go ahead and make this happen. Meanwhile, we'll secure everybody that's important in strategic deep underground military bunkers, and then we'll let this play out. Is that really the case, or is there a global enmity?
Something, when I was, when I went to Switzerland and when I talked to some of these people, the so-called elite, it's not a question of them up there because they consider everybody expendable containers. They've changed their vernacular. Today you're nothing more than a human resource.
Okay.
In fact, if you go apply for a job, don't you go to the human resource today?
This is absolutely true. Absolutely, yep.
Well, we consider people expendable containers. Today they're useless eaters. That's the reason why all these FEMA camps are being set up.
Right.
And, of course, it's all the game that they're doing. Now, you're looking at who's controlling it. Now, I sat in on a meeting on the population reduction. There was like a dozen of us. And we talked on what they had planned. That was the plans that we were discussing using neutron bombs on the major cities. That'll keep the buildings intact, but people will be basically going away.
Right.
And then the secondary thing that says biologicals are much cheaper, so they've been playing around with that game. I talked to a couple doctors on the technologies they have. Meanwhile, we have such incredible weapons that they don't let the public know about.
Right.
The new EMF weapons that they have, it'll wipe out, just stops everything with a computer in it, or actually a chip in it.
Right.
And your car will stop, everything. You can't even pump gasoline, to give you an idea. They have that ready. There's a book, 1 Second After, out there. I urge your listeners to download it off of Amazon or one of the places, or get it. Anyway, when I read the book, and the foreword on that was by Newt Gingrich. And it's basically warning us to get ready for when this quote, come down. Oh, they've already been practiced in some parts of the country. As you know, the Internet's been shut down.
Uh-huh.
Well, they can shut the whole country down instantly, 1 second. All things shuts down. All of a sudden you got your and my program that we're talking about right now will not exist. Nobody will have any communication, nor will you be able to go anywhere.
Right. Wow. And
that's coming up.
You think that would be the prelude to the FEMA camp movement?
Well, I see you have to get people out there. The government, when I was checking this book out, I was very concerned. I mean, if Gingrich put the front on it, and I read the book, and I said, this is pretty scary. I said, and I called one of my friends who's kind of an inner guy. I said, go check this out with your next door neighbor. And he came back. His next door neighbor is some guy named Donald Rumsfeld.
Right.
So he said they were very much aware of it when he was Secretary of Defense, and he said that his comment was that North Korea has that technology to do right now, and they were very concerned. So they've ordered their military to set on devices to cover all the tanks and the motors that they have to shield the electronics so they can continue.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean, it's coming close right now, Bob.
Yeah. So let's kind of go around the globe a little bit, world leader wise. All of a sudden, Putin is now the bad guy. I mean, just really in the last week, he's I have a friend who calls me, and he's a great guy, and he's got a fairly good grasp on stuff, but he really bites on the bait of the mass media, and all of a sudden he's telling me what a bad dude Putin is, and things are going to hell in Russia. This is the perception of Putin has changed rapidly over the last 7 days. What's going on there with that, to the best of your ability, George, or to the best of your knowledge?
Well, no, Putin is not dumb. He's sitting in the position. He put himself so he could become the president during this time that you're looking at.
Right.
We're not saying that he's not having a bad time over there, but he's making deals with China to maintain his position over it. Now, Russia's huge. People don't realize how big Russia is, actually. It's 11 time zones.
Yeah.
And they've made a deal with China in order to provide all of the oil and gas. As you know, they got enormous amounts of natural resources
right.
But the trouble is their latitude. You realize all of Europe is above the latitude, like our Canadian border.
Yes.
So it's all colder.
Yeah.
And it's all, freezing. You got Siberia and all that stuff. But and their population is shrinking because of that. People are, migrating. They're just going there, and it's getting to be that. Now, my son happens to be a nuclear physicist who spent 3.5 years in the secret cities in Russia, so I have a little different perspective on what's happening over there. We're not saying that they're not having problems, but they're certainly being taken care of. So they're getting ready themselves with China for this war. They know this war is coming up.
Yeah.
So they have the people out there to say, hey, we're having more democracy and they're having more things. Well, if you've seen the movies and stuff or the TV things of Russia, everybody's got cars over there. They got gasoline.
Right. They're not.
No, it's not. But they've got to make him a bad guy again now.
Right.
Putin, he's pretty smart. He was KGB, as you know, when he came back in. That's kind of like, when Bush was the CIA head. People forget all these things. The intelligence community is, actually the CIA guys think that they run our country. I don't know if you know that, but it's great.
I mean, I'm sure if you went down to, through the ranks, CIA, Army, naval intelligence, I'm sure they all have some sort of claim or ownership or, thinking that they're the ones that are pulling the levers. What about Obama? I mean, there's so much, information, misinformation, noise about Obama. What's your take and the best kind of inside scoop you've got on him?
I don't have any. The only thing I look at it, when they put him into office, there was some kind of agenda that was coming up. That's all I know. I don't think we have any president since JFK, frankly, and JFK was put in office.
That's right.
Except for but he woke up to find out how much power he had, and they had to get rid of him.
Yeah.
But the rest of them are all and they're all beholding to somebody else. I mean, look, Obama immediately put our country in debt with another $6 trillion, bailing out the crazy stock market, the big insurance company up there, and the insurance company, because they were bailed out, they were insuring the pension funds for Congress.
Right, AIG.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, back in 1990, when I first came into contact with you and the material that you were disseminating at that time, one of the things you talked about was this whole concept of robotoids and synthetic robots and clones. Do you still ascribe to that theory in terms of people being put in place that aren't human at all?
Oh, you bet. I have a doctor friend who I haven't talked to actually for a couple of years, but treats the clones. They've been cloning people since '39. There's 8 countries making people.
Yeah.
So I was looking at, and it's a little hard. How do you tell them apart? And that I had a nurse when I was in Washington D.C. who works at Bethesda, and they said there's a wing in Bethesda that they treat that are all clones, and they don't call them clones; they call them the others. I thought that was an interesting term.
Uh-huh.
But and then I started. Dr. Peter Beater came out with the technology on it. People can look that up on the internet on the cloning techniques, and so that was pretty fascinating. Then I started looking at some of the old movies that we had out here. Like if you go look at The Boys from Brazil, the old movie.
Yeah.
That cloning technique that is actually shown is exactly the same thing the United States use. Russia's is a little bit different. China's is a little different, but they all have the same abilities. The problem with the clonings that they have, stress breaks down the clone pretty fast. Now, when we get stressful, what happens? We get some kind of disease, but the clones are all I don't know if you're familiar how the method that they do it, but it's pretty simple when you look at it. But how do they get the intelligence so that person they look almost identical? The truth is you can see some changes in them. It's like Young Bush.
Yeah.
Go get your video when he first came in office and listen to the way he talks and look at him very carefully, and then get the current videos that you see of him, and you'll see a different person.
Yeah.
And then he even talks different. Yeah,
he does talk different. I mean, there's clearly a demarcation between the guy that went in and the guy that we see now. It's pretty evident.
Well, it's like even Jimmy Carter, the real one. My understanding is the real one died a long time ago of brain cancer.
Yeah, and
so they're all used for other things. I get more technology. Beater put out a lot of that stuff in the Wisconsin reports on some of them. So that's just technology that's available. So we don't know who we're dealing with at this minute, and I don't know how you'd be able to tell the difference between them unless you're up with them. And they usually, they could change the whole family if they wanted to. It's just the DNA programming that they have.
Right. So do you think that there could be theoretically a clone in existence as well as the real person, that there would be some sort of usefulness or kind of program to have them both exist simultaneously?
Probably.
Yeah.
It could be that. I mean, let's put it this way. When Hitler died, well, Hitler didn't die. His cousin was the one that was in the bunker.
Right.
I mean, even Stalin knew that. But Hitler died a few years ago down in Brazil, and you started looking at, you always have a stand-in. How many stand-ins? I mean, you got some identical stand-ins right now that were there for Bush. They're out in movies, and they make cartoons out of some of that stuff.
Yeah.
Right now, I don't see any stand-ins for Obama, but I haven't been watching it because the whole media is so controlled right now.
Yeah.
I mean, you only got a few people out here like yourself and Hannity trying to get some of the truth out there to people, and they set themselves. Remember, they're all attorneys. That's basically what the Congress is right now. These people are very careful on how to protect themselves.
Right. Let's take this up a few thousand feet. Let's take a journey into space. Have you been hearing about this object near Mercury that they've discovered over the past? Well, they've just broke the news that it's there. Have you heard about this thing? And if you have, what's your take on it?
No, I haven't. I've been gone for the last 2.5 weeks, frankly, and I haven't paid attention to the going on. The only thing I know is I kind of look at monitors from what the information I get from the ETs of Kilauea taking off again, and now we're expecting some more earthquakes and expanding across the United States, as you know.
Right.
That's going to be coming up too. So the outer space stuff, we really can't address all of that at this minute. We have the technology to go to other planets, not using the propulsion systems that they talk about, using petroleum. It's got to be using the frequency, the gravity wave amplifiers, and the other things that we have that are in Area S4 out in Nevada.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the alien intelligence. Now the alien intelligence, the extraterrestrials. I mean, do they have a name? Are they Pleiadians? Are they Syrians? Anunnaki? I mean, how do they dress themselves?
Well,
how do you know?
We're their descendants. When I first got involved with the physical craft, I'm sitting in Edwards Air Force Base, 10 away, and basically 10 feet away from an alien craft.
Right.
But when I, 25 years after that, I was sitting here looking at the stuff when I was over in Switzerland with Billy Meyer, and Billy Meyer, of course, was in contact with the group from the Pleiades, if we want to call it that. And that's opened up the Pandora's box for me, because all of a sudden I've got the disc and everything else flying around me. And that's basically that's when I made an agreement with the ETs to publish their information, and that's what you were talking about before. The Handbook, Embracing Rainbow Becoming, and the last one, the Messages to the Ground Crew.
Yeah. That was really, for me, a profound and kind of groundbreaking book. As I mentioned earlier, I didn't go further than the first edition. But so let's take that book as a template, okay? So that book was written in at least I got it in 1998, 99. Where are we in terms of the scenarios that were proposed in that book? Where are we now as it relates to the information in the Handbook for the New Paradigm?
Have you? Do you have a copy of the last book of information that I've?
I don't, George. I just had the first copy. That's it.
Is that all?
Yep.
Well, let me read you I'll read this to your listeners.
Okay.
It is with regret that we inform you that the window of opportunity to salvage your planet and its human inhabitants is now closing. We're grateful for those beings that have heard the warnings and have turned their attention towards the creation of a more desirable outcome. Regretfully, the number is too few to make any measurable difference. The days ahead will be difficult and discouraging for those who now know what might have been. It is our suggested advice that those who are committed to their service as the ground crew redouble their efforts to draw to themselves a circle of believers to support each other to the days ahead. There's now more important activities for this force of will in order to focus the attention of a survival of a segment of awake and aware individuals to the times to come. These words are the most discouraging message we have given through this source. It's not intended to indicate your assistance in this cause is finished, but instead that it's more important than ever. Depressing as they sound, they simply indicate that each must draw from within themselves the ability to become more committed than ever, to find intention of finding ways to apply the universal laws in every situation that arise on a daily basis. Within every circumstance is opportunity. The laws do work, but remember the laws work for all who apply them, but more cooperatively with those that apply them in harmony with the creative flow of energy intended to expand and enhance the involvement of the conscious awareness towards perfect wisdom. As difficult as the planetary situation is, there's a purpose to it. Mankind must learn to be a responsible being individually, which then in composite form is reflected on the planetary whole. It also must be remembered that the adversarial energies that are being applied have been carefully planned and carried out over eons of sequential time. Humanity has been considered only as pawns in a chess game that contain more power plays than the third-dimensional mind can grasp. Does not relegate humanity to an unimportant role. Conscious awareness is at the top of the creational pile and not to be taken lightly. The last book, the Messages to the Ground Crew, I urge your listeners to contact us and get a whole set of them and read them a couple of times so they can be in contact with, quote, this awareness as we're talking about, because we're going to need all the guidance we can get in the days ahead.
So essentially they're saying we're screwed. Right? I mean, that's kind of the message.
That's exactly right. Essentially, Robert, it's like you and I getting together with other people around us in order to support us, knowing what's coming around, and then we're not going to stop it.
Right.
So whatever game that you thought you had, or whatever belief system you thought you had, by reading all of the books, you're going to get a better understanding on how the universe works. And, we're just one of many of the millions of planets that are inhabited in the universe, but we're also considered the prison planet.
Yeah.
We don't, because of what we are, we're basically not allowed to get off of the planet. As the guy said, well, take me to another planet. And they said, with the technology that just know. I said, you trash our planet in half the time, because we got all these other things we haven't learned about.
Right.
And so then with that game, I agreed to basically publish the information. I mean, it was a joke, as a matter of fact. When I got with the ETs, I told them how big the book had to be. They had to write everything on the book. Everything is written by them. They even did the back page for me, which I thought was pretty good.
So can I ask you a question? I mean, I'm always interested in process. Like, how did you actually write the book yourself? Did somebody else write?
Let's put it this way. When you and I are talking right now, that's the way we get our information. The information would come down, and you sit in front of your computer. That's all you're doing.
Okay.
And the computer you start putting in the information as you're like you and I are talking. We're just kind of a third party. There was points in the thing when I was looking down. I look at what just got you putting down, and I said, now that should be italicized. And I never touched the computer. That was totally amazing. I'm sitting here watching in front of me, and they become italicized.
Right.
So they have the ability to do all these things, but they try to work through us because that's our game. And remember, we're nothing more than a spirit inside this rhetoric, or this body we call.
Right.
So so the challenges are, how do you become in contact? And that's what the basis of the Handbook and the other two series, the other two books, The Embracing Rainbow and Becoming. By reading those, you can be in direct contact and talk to them just like you and I do. And now you can be in contact with beings that, are not of this dimension, or they may come into this dimension. Because we got many games going on. There's many levels of understanding. I mean, when you get rid of this rhetoric, you're not through. That personality of you is going to continue on your journey.
Right.
And the understanding of that is all spelled out in these, to understand what we are in this limited time we consider the Earth, whether it's 10 years, 20 seconds, or 100 years. This is all part of a bigger game.
Yeah. Well, we're listening to George Green, the always fascinating and informative George Green. We're talking about kind of where we are right now in terms of the planetary evolution or de-evolution, depending on how you want to view that. What about Earth changes, George? I mean, aren't Earth changes kind of the wild card in all this? I mean,
No, Robert. Let's clear that up. I do have some of that stuff on my website, which is nohoax, nohoax.com, and I'll be putting in more on the upcoming Earth changes. What's involved? A lot of it is the planet itself is going to be starting to change because we're polluting the planet. I mean, you fly around, or I do anyway.
Yeah.
The air is totally polluted. We got all this radiation up about, it's 4 miles thick that's surrounding the planet, which is allowing the gamma and ultraviolet rays to come in. Meanwhile, as our planet, Robert, to give you a scenario, how fast are you traveling this second? While you and I are talking, how fast are you going?
Right now, I'm not going very fast at all. But if you're talking about the speed of the planet, very fast.
Well, you're going 1,000 miles an hour just in the planet, right? It's been just as 24 hours, you go 24,000 miles around.
Right.
All right. But remember, the planet itself is going around the sun, which is 365.25 days, and that elliptical deal is putting you to the point where you're probably traveling closer to 30,000 miles an hour.
Yeah.
Well, meanwhile, our sun, our solar system, is traveling around the central sun of the Pleiades, called Alcyon, and the cycle's about 26,000 years. So you imagine the timing that we're going on. You're probably approaching the speed of light, and yet it's relative, right?
Yeah.
So now we have to look at, since we're obtaining this thing and we're going there, and even when you hear about people that go the near death, they go back to the light. Well, remember, you're nothing more than condensed light, or light stopped. And light stopped is the periodic table of elements at the vibration level. Mm-hmm. So it becomes more interesting on what you're saying now, because we're reaching a point the ETs are telling me astrology, not as the astrologers looking at it, is very important on the point we are within the universe. Well, we've reached a point where there's a ring of energy. They call it the monastic ring or the photon belt. You may have heard about that.
Yes, absolutely.
And that is already starting to affect the planet. So not only do we have the planet itself, which is starting to reject us because we're polluting it so bad, we have the planet going into this vibrational pattern that we're going to get. So the earthquakes and weather and everything else is going to be escalating. They told me, and this is some time ago, to get ready for 300 to 400 mile an hour winds on the surface of the planet.
Right.
Of course, when I got through reading, I'm a little advanced of the game. I flew down to Italy, Texas, and I went to school down there at Monolithic Dome to learn how to build stuff that'll withstand that. In my old game, I was a real estate developer, and I built stuff in 22 states. I don't have any of the structures that I built. And, I had shopping centers, office buildings, motels, and restaurants and stuff. None of them will withstand that kind of a wind.
Yeah.
So when I went to monolithic domes, which is basically concrete, they're kind of like an igloo made out of concrete. I said, now this makes perfect sense because they're totally insulated. They'll cover it. They're the only things that withstand the hurricanes, for instance, that hit the East Coast. All the monolithic domes are still there.
Yeah.
Anyway, you can build them yourself. They're pretty simple. And I suggest your people just go to the internet and pull up monolithic domes and look at some of them. They build schools and all kinds of stuff. They're getting ready.
Yeah.
Anyway, that, and then we have the changes in the weather. How many states, as you and I are speaking, there's like 13 or 14 states that are under winter warnings, high winds right now.
Yeah.
Okay, and last week in Los Angeles had over 100 mile an hour winds.
Absolutely, yeah.
Blowing things down. Mount Baldy had 120 mile an hour winds. This is out in the east end of the Los Angeles Valley, out towards Palm Springs. But these were sustained for over a week.
Right.
Well, okay, so now we got wind. Now let's take another problem. Because of what we've done to the higher atmosphere, playing the game, let me give you some background. As we discovered the nuclear bomb technology, and they started exploding bombs down in, New Mexico and what have you primarily, idiots exploded some in the higher atmosphere. And what they've done is put up radiation around the planet, which is eating holes through the ozone.
Right.
Now, the eating holes in the ozone gives us the gamma and ultraviolet rays which are coming down and basically killing off the life forms. There are 1,000 life forms today on the planet. Now, there's lots of life forms, so they go from there. But the most important ones, to me, are the oxygen producers, which are the plants in the ocean, and they turn black. When you got a black car, you put it in front of the sun, what happens? Heats up, doesn't it?
It's very hot, yeah.
So guess what's happening to the oceans? Aren't they heating up?
Yeah.
Okay, so meanwhile, we have a real tremendous displacement problem because what's happening on both the North Pole and the South Pole? What's melting, in other words, all that ice is coming down. Now it's going to the ocean. Oceans are heating up, and all the air currents are all changing.
Right.
And this is all because of the planet and also our position in the universe.
Yeah.
So what we've been told to is get ready for, quote, major earthquakes, more volcanoes. Actually, the United States will be split in two at some point.
Right.
And, I don't have the timing on it, but I do have a lot of details what it's going to end up like.
So I guess my question, when I broached the subject of weather, George, my question was, here we have all these, exquisite dark plans that are being trotted out by the quote-unquote elite or the forces of darkness, and my question was, does the weather and do Earth changes possess a kind of an X factor in all this? I mean, could it all just, or are they so in control of that too that they're factoring that into their plan as well, quote unquote? Well,
they're factoring in their plan. That was part of the HARP program. I mean, Nick Begich, his angels don't play his harp when he went into the HARP web,
Right.
And the other stuff, I talked to Nick, I don't know, a couple months ago, but we were discussing what's coming up, and he says, hey, there's no way we're going to stop this now. So he's no longer on the radio. You can't even hear him anymore. Because he says it's too late. Just get yourself squared away, get ready for all these things, get yourself out of the major cities, into a small town, and try to get people awakened. Well, that's what's happening with the Handbook. There's groups of people that are all over forming that will be kind of the nucleus of whatever is going to be left on the planet.
Yeah. You know, it's really interesting, George, is I spend a lot of time on the Internet. I go to a lot of mainstream media sites, not because I'm drawn to mainstream media, but because I like to gauge what people are thinking. And, I peruse a lot of comments on, mainstream news stories on Yahoo and things like that. And I can tell you right now, I've seen a major shift in the past year, and the shift is twofold. One, I've seen people become more mean and impersonal and cold. That's what you can read that in their comments. There's almost a sociopathy that is emerging, through the blog space or the internet space. And then the other is there are a lot of people that are waking up. I'm seeing more and more comments on these websites where people are they're getting it, at some level. And I'm a witness to this because I've been watching this stuff for 20 years now, and on the internet since it's been my business for 10 years, and I can definitely sense a shift. But obviously these people are not kind of at the same level as understanding the big picture, but there is some waking up taking place. Could you at least acknowledge that even if it's too late, people are starting to come around slowly?
Well, except for we got the big problem. Halloween, we reached 7 billion people on the planet.
Right.
And a lot of them don't even have the technology we have. Our mythology up here is all the kids that are, as soon as they're born, 3 years old, they give them computer games. And most of these games are based on war right now. So they start looking at killing other things, and they just think they're, nonchalant other things. Right now we got missiles going on in the Middle East, and it's probably controlled by a 20-year-old or 22-year-old sitting in Kansas City.
Yeah,
they have no thoughts. There's no real reality of what's going on between and how important human life is.
Yeah, absolutely disturbing. What about chemtrails? Have the ETs talked to you about chemtrails and what's going on with them?
Well, I published a book on that, on chemtrails. And this is the Army officer that was all upset about how they're doing it. The ETs have said that this is part of it's a dual purpose. The first thing, you and I were just talking a minute ago about the ultraviolet rays coming down and killing things off. How do we stop that? Because we're putting all the holes up there.
Right.
Well, the chemtrails were supposed to act kind of like as a web around the planet in order to keep the air and everything polluted. The trouble is, the chemistry they put in the chemtrails is also polluting to people.
Yeah.
So now you got a twofold situation. It's not that they're not up there. It's their purpose was again to protect us as long as they could from all of the other rays that are coming from the rest of the the universe. The other thing is, there are poisons in it that are coming down on the people, but we're just expendables.
Right. We've got a couple people that are lined up in the queue here, and they may have a question for you. Do you feel like taking a few calls, George?
Sure.
Okay,
Go for it.
Let's bring somebody on here. Hi, thanks for listening. You're on the air with Robert and George. Do you have a question for George? Hello? Going once, going twice. All right, let's go over here. Hey, you're on the air with Robert and George. Do you have a question for George today?
Robert, is this you?
It is me. What's going on, Bosch?
Nothing. I have a great question. He mentioned Alcyone. So, George, thank you for being here. I'm not one into politics and stuff. I am a planetarian, though, and I'm a Pleiadian. So my question to you, since you mentioned Alcyone, what advantage, if any, do you see that there is for people like myself on the planet who know where they're from, who have a grand idea that's pretty accurate about what their role is on the planet at this time? What do you think about that as a reality, and what could be the benefits of us knowing our Pleiadian heritage or from wherever we're from on the planet at this time?
Well, frankly, just you've been awakened to the point that you're one of the Pleiadians who were dropped down here on this planet. Remember, most of the Pleiadians came from Syria before, and they just migrate to the universe finding planets, and planet Earth was a perfect thing. At this point, if you've got that lineage in there and you've been awakened to that, then you have a better understanding that of what we have to do is awaken other people that there's other planets going on, and we're affecting the whole universe right now. As a matter of fact, if you look at the stars tonight, or look up there, look at the stars that are strobing red, blue, and green. These are not stars; these are spacecraft. We're kind of a big television show right now. We're the actors in a TV show, and we're being monitored by all kinds of ETs from different star systems.
Yes, correct.
And so what we have to do now is, what is your job is just to awaken people to get themselves prepared, because we're not going to change the ending of the scenario. The more I get from different ET information that I'm traveling around the world with other people that are in contact, we just got ourselves, I don't know where to be at this minute, frankly. I've got people who have left and gone down to Ecuador. I had a condo down there the last couple of years. Because you got to be south of the equator to be safe. We're all going to be affected. There's not people that are going to be safe places here. They're going to be safe places every place. But each one of them has to ask for guidance from within. Because there's nobody going to come save us. This is a do-it-yourself job.
Okay. And did you have any kind of estimated timeline? Because my understanding of the 26,000 years is that it is a water cycle. Everyone's talking about this other stuff, but it's really a water cycle. So regarding what you see coming down the pipe for people that are conscious, with as you say, with the mandate to awaken others, what kind of rough estimate timeline do you currently have that would give us some kind of heads up so we'll know what kind of time frames we're dealing with here?
Well, something. The cycle to me, everybody originally set the motion of the plan 2000. But the truth is, I think the matter really starts. The increases of the Earth changes are going to be the year 2012 up to the year 2024.
Okay.
So we got the next 12 years of the Earth changes. Meanwhile, the bad guys on the planet, if you want to call them that, politics is two words. I don't know if you know that. Poly means many, and ticks are bloodsuckers.
Blood-sucking, that's right. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and listen. Thank you, George. Thanks, Robert. I'm going to continue to listen. You can hang up on me.
All right, thanks, Flash. Take care.
Bye-bye.
So that was actually a question I was going to ask you, George. I feel like 2012. There's some things that have to take place in 2012. Obviously, the London Olympics in 2012 is a very big deal. It's a mega ritual. They need to have this thing. That's gonna take place. And then we've got this election coming up. Do you think we're actually going to have an election, George, or do you think that's going to be suspended?
Well, the only way they could suspend it is if they started a war. So you got these kind of games going, and I think that's the next game, because Congress is not doing anything. Like you say, we got the best Congress money can buy. Actually, our congressmen should have a football uniform on the back of it and see who their corporate sponsor is. That's what it amounts to. Yeah. It's unfortunate it's that way, because you always follow what the money is, and the other problem is like Kissinger said, the absolute aphrodisiac is power.
Right.
Well, you put these guys, you got 530 plus people up there that have all the power in the world to control within their own section, but they're all attorneys, and they've mixed up the laws so bad that they have attorneys to figure out what attorneys have done. And they keep running the game through the so-called Supreme Court. Supreme Court of what? Because they keep changing those rules.
Right, absolutely.
So you and I are living in a game of how do we get ourselves. My suggestion is to get you and your family as much as aware as possible. But your family is they're all, like I have 3 kids, and they're all in different parts of the country. Yeah. They're not interested in what Dad's doing over here. They got to survive themselves.
Right.
But they understand what's going on, but they're like everybody else. I got a paycheck coming in, or my My son-in-law was out of work for a year. He finally got another job. But there's so many people. There's 23% of the people out of work in the country right now.
Yeah, the unemployment figures are so obscenely skewed right now. It's not even funny.
Well, all the newspapers and all the media. You know, you can't go to the only close, if you go to a public station, probably Fox has, that's a CNN thing. But they're fairly close on some of the information, but they put out what they want to do at the time.
Sure. Oh, George, what do you know about Ron Paul? Is he for real? Is he a good guy? Is he an inside guy?
No, he's a good guy. The only problem is he understands the system. When you get to Washington, D.C., it's like if you got elected, Robert, right now, and you went to Washington, D.C., you can't bring your staff, your friends with you. They provide you a staff that already knows what the games are.
Right.
So you got to go. And then it's a question of taking years to get up to the point they want. We should have politicians up there for one term only, period, and then get them going from there. All the rest of it, because they get too ingrained on the stuff. The other problem is they lose. It's like, Ted Kennedy, when I was with him. He ran around the country. They don't have any identification. They're put into office. Basically, they're there, and they're going to keep there. And the so-called elite group of these committees, and I sat in on a couple of them, the Democratic section and some of the Republicans, and they all say, well, we're going to fight it. That's because they're focused on what it's going. And I've always been voting for the business because business creates a job. Well, right now, Obama are telling everybody with their business, make it as cheap as you can. So put your company offshore.
Right.
In other words, go use the labor where it's cheaper. I mean, I was actually, a long time ago, was looking at the Maquiladora program down in San Diego. That's where there's a kind of a no man's land down there where you can go into Mexico, build all of the warehouses, and they're using Mexican labor, and they build everything and then bring it back over, and there's no duty, no nothing.
Right.
But you can use people. It's like when I flew with the vice president of Haynes Corporation down in Costa Rica. I owned a coffee farm down there. Uh-huh. And when I was with him, they have the Haynes, they manufacture all the briefs, the stuff that you're doing. Anyway, they were going to shut down the plants because the cost of the Costa Ricans were getting up to, $50 a day. And that was too much, so they were moving them all to Haiti because you can buy people for $1 a day. Think about that, Robert.
Yeah. Yeah, human capital. But so what about
the human resource?
Yeah, absolutely. Recently this movie. I don't know if you've seen it on the internet or heard about it. This movie Thrive came out. Do you know about Thrive?
No, I don't know anything about it. I haven't been watching any of them. I haven't seen a movie for quite a while.
Well, you may want to track this down, George. You might find it remotely interesting. Foster Gamble, who is the son of James Gamble, who is part of the Foster and Gamble mega fortune, just came out with a movie recently, and he's touting free energy, and basically is saying there's a huge conspiracy, and the conspiracy to keep free energy from us, and he's got a number of people, Barbara Marx Hubbard, and Deepak Chopra, and your cast of new age characters, trying to reinforce this. And I was just wondering if you had any take on that, or Foster Gamble, or and since obviously you don't, you may want to check the movie out. I think you might find it interesting.
Well, I'll check it out. When it comes to the free energy device, John Bedini is a close friend of mine. In fact, we have lunch occasionally. Bedini is the father. He's kind of the Nikola Tesla, the current one. He and Tom Bearden, with all the free energy devices. Yeah. He's got probably 100 of them in his warehouse, which is only about a mile from my office. Uh-huh. To give you an idea. There's all kinds of them, magnetic motors of different things. He's got a huge job. And once a year for the last couple of years, they've had a big resort, and they've had people fly in from all over to go look at all this stuff. But it hasn't translated to anything out here. Now, the ETs say we've been looking at the wrong thing anyway. We should look at light and look at some like the pyramids where the capstones are. Because basically taking light and amplifying on that in order to get all the energy we need. In fact, that energy, if you look at it, is the stuff that drives the extraterrestrial craft.
Yeah.
It's not none of this petroleum and all this stuff. That's killing the planet off.
Right. Absolutely. So what about gold and silver, George? Are they still good buys? Do people still need them?
Oh, you bet. I'm only 5 blocks from the Mint. That's the reason why I'm here in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. So I get gold and silver for people. Whatever it costs me right now, it's like $1 over spot because the dollar is the cost for fabricating the silver. But anybody wants it, they can just get a hold of me and I'll get it for them. Okay. But that's not a problem. And gold, primarily gold is a world market. Now, historically, as you know, if the pirates all went after gold and silver. As a matter of fact, right now they go with the pirate ships that are sunk and they go after it. Everybody around the world takes gold. And if you look at South America right now, I'm watching the play between Ecuador and Venezuela because Venezuela just took back all their gold that they had in England.
Right, I saw that. Yeah.
Okay, and what it's amounting to me, and I'm going to call down to Ecuador in a couple hours because I can see them creating their own currency for Latin America. So that's what they're trying to do right now. Ecuador's on the dollar right now, but they just passed a law this week, so you can't take the dollar out of the country. They charge a 5% fee. Well, big deal. MasterCard and Visa's 3 to 4%.
Right.
So
right.
It's just everybody's trying to get things squared away, and I'm looking at the same position that they are. But where do I put my money? I got rid of all my real estate.
Yeah.
I mean, not all of it, but pretty close. I'd like to get rid of some more, but as you know, there's no lenders out here, and the lenders are the ones that establish the business. Yeah. So what's happening, I move all my money into gold and silver, and that's where my assets are. It's easily be used. The government has new rules in taking gold out of the country, however. But I can talk to your people if they call me, and discuss all of that. And again, you can just if people want to find me, just take their computer and just Google George Green. I'm all over the place.
Well, certainly glad you were here today with us, George. I really appreciate it.
Okay.
So
I'm glad to help you in any way I can, Robert, and help your listeners that are on there because we need to get the people wakened. And I suggest every one of your listeners, to get the handbook set.
Okay.
In physical if you want to, or go to my website. You can download the first 3 books for free.
Yeah, well, there you go. It's a bargain in today's day and age. Where yesterday, I went to a store, and it was $11.99. No, it was $8.99 for a pound of organic beef, ground beef. $8.99.
Yeah, and you got to be careful of the word organic when you come out here too, because I went to the National Health Food deal out here, and that certified organic is not 100%. So you look at it, you want to make sure that the beef is not set with the GMO modified things on it. So that's better than that. But you can do that. The local farmers and stuff know where that's at.
Yeah.
But you're paying the price of it. That's nothing. Like I say, if I paid $18 for a hamburger over in Europe at McDonald's, what does that tell you?
That's true. It's all pretty relative. Well, listen, George, thank you again for your time. NoHoax.com is your website, and people can download the Handbook for the New Paradigm, and also
Embracing the Rainbow and Becoming. Yeah.
And then also, if they're interested in talking about gold and silver, they can do that there as well. So,
thanks
got
again,
it. George.
Get on me. Thanks, Robert.
Okay. Take care. All right, that was George Green. Well, I think we just ended that at 11:11. Am I right? It could be right. It's 11:12 now. NoHoax.com is George's website, and there's some chilling information. There's some very bracing information that he just shared with us, and I've been watching what's been taking place with the FEMA camps and SB 1867, and it's not heartening. It is really not heartening. So it's going to be interesting to see how all this gets played out. And I don't think it's going to happen all at once. There's going to be sort of incremental stages, and then ultimately there could be that moment where the power just drops out, or the disconnection of the internet takes place, the decoupling of the internet. But we can't live in fear. We can't cower over something that hasn't happened yet. So I guess the best axiom would be to be in this world but not of it, right? I mean, that's kind of the playbook, for the being human experience. Okay, it's 11:13 now. minute after I just said it was 11:12. If you want to call in, you want to talk about the last hour, if you want to talk about what your thoughts are regarding some of George's material, if you want to talk about your own insight or your own feeling. I mean, here we are. We're the 9th of December. There's just a few weeks left here in 2011, folks, and then 2012 is right on us. And 2012, from an astrological perspective, is going to be one hell of a ride. And it actually starts tomorrow. Uranus goes direct, and at the same time, we have a major lunar eclipse. The moon is actually going to look red. It's what they call a blood moon. It's going to be a very interesting moon. It has there are a lot of correlations and a lot of angles that are getting played out with this moon and with this Uranus direct. I wrote extensively about it on my newsletter, which I sent out in the wee hours of the morning. If you're interested in my newsletter, you can go to my website, robertphoenix.com, and subscribe to it. It's a scant $3.99 per month. But I get into things that I don't get into on the website. It's exclusive content, and I looked in the last newsletter primarily at what's happening with Russia, with Syria, with North Africa, and how it relates astrologically to what's going on. So what was interesting is that in the chart for Russia has two charts. There's the Bolshevik Revolution chart, which is drawn from, I believe it's November 5th, 1917, or November 17th, 1917. That's it. And then the other chart is 12/25, 1991, when the new Russia is born. Two very distinct charts, although astrologically it would be like having a natal chart and a progress chart in some ways. So I looked at aspects for both of those charts. Pretty fascinating. The new version of Russia, based on its astrological chart, is going to be around for a long time. It is not going anywhere. Russia, as we know it will exist, and it will be tenacious. It's got 5 planets in Capricorn, and right now Pluto's moving across all those planets in Capricorn, so it's transforming itself. And whenever you go into a Pluto conjunction with any planet, there is an element of darkness that's involved, and a lot of projection that takes place. Fascinating chart with Russia. As it stands now, based on the 12/25 birth date of 1991, Russia is in opposition to the United States with all the Cancerian planets that the United States has. And some of them oppose and some of them don't oppose, but there's enough opposition where it feels very bipolar. And in fact, Russia occupies the 5th house of its chart, and the United States occupies the 11th house of its chart, the house of friendship. So there's a split. So they're connected, because you can't really exist without the opposition in some way. You define yourself against the opposition, but there is an opposition nonetheless. Anyway, a lot of that activity starts tomorrow, and I'm a little concerned about California and the Ring of Fire, because this is where the eclipse is happening. It's taking place pretty much in California, in Asia, in Australia. The eclipse will be visible. And we just put up an interview with Rob Tillett, which took place, was it last year? It was early in the year. I think it was the last big solar eclipse, which might have been, was that June? Anyway, that interview was a little muddy on the audio side, but we punched it up. You can go to YouTube now. Go to my YouTube channel, and you can actually listen to my interview with Rob. Thank you, Erica, for doing that. And you can hear what he has to say about eclipses. And one of the things that he mentions is that eclipses, that the areas where the eclipse actually crosses and is visible, those are the areas that are most affected by the eclipse. And again, the aforementioned area that I spoke of here, California, Washington, Oregon, parts of Mexico, and into Japan and Australia. So keep your eye on those areas, especially for the next 48 hours. And the energy with eclipses, there's a lag time sometimes. So there are at least 2 to 3 days after the eclipse, you can still feel the intensity of the eclipse energy. Also, there is a major T-square happening on the 13th of December with the Moon in Cancer, Uranus in Aries, and Pluto in Capricorn. Somebody just called in, 951 area code. Let's find out who they are, if they have anything that they'd like to share with us today. I got a quick finger today, so be nice. All right, here we go. Hi, you're on the air with Robert. Hello.
Hi, Robert. This is Teresa from Southern Cal. Just wanted to call real quick.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. How are you? I just listened to George. It was a wonderful, wonderful time with him. I'm fascinated by... I hear an echo. Do you hear an echo?
Let me just turn this down a little bit.
Okay.
Try it now.
Okay, that's better.
Okay.
Yeah. I just kind of, for lack of a better word, freaked out when he was talking about stars. I think he mentioned, you look out and you see a star that's flashing red, blue, green, kind of.
Yeah, I've seen.
Remember that?
Yeah, I've seen.
I just saw for the very first time last night.
Yeah.
I've never noticed before. I was just looking out my window last night, and to the south, I guess southeast, I live in Southern Cal, and it looked like it was right over, I swear, towards March Air Force Base. Uh-huh. And I looked up, and I saw this huge star, and I'm thinking, that's got to be a plane. But I looked for a long time. It wasn't moving, and I thought, well, maybe it's a satellite, but it looked more like a star. It was up, it wasn't low. And I saw the lights flashing, and I thought, wow, that's interesting. But I didn't want to, jump to conclusion and think, okay, maybe that's some kind of craft or something. But then when he said this on the phone today, I'm like, whoa, this is strange. It just happened last night, and I thought, okay. And then you're talking about California and the eclipse, and thinking, I don't know. Yeah, maybe there's something up there watching for sure.
Could be. I mean, I remember, I guess it was about a year, I think it was the night that I did the interview with Alexis Tyler. I was coming back from, I had a friend with me. I picked her up at the BART station, and we were driving, and she saw it and I saw it too. It was a really large, light, and it looked like it was a planet. Like maybe you could have convinced yourself that it might have been Jupiter, right? But it wasn't, because it was flashing the color sequence, and it actually seemed to be moving too. That was the trippy part.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, that's why I thought it was a plane, and I saw the red. I thought, okay, that's the red light on a big jet or something, But then it looked like there was some green and blue too, and I couldn't stand there and look at it for hours. So unfortunately, I couldn't. I didn't go back to it. I just made light of it, and that was it. But it just was interesting. And then he mentioned that today. So anyway, just wanted to call in and just share that for what it's worth.
Well, thank you. I mean, I would count interesting synchronicity. We always enjoy stuff like that. So, Teresa, I have a quick question to ask you. So you've got this lovely tribe of girls, aka your daughters. Do they have any idea about what you're about? And do you talk to them about any of this stuff?
No, not really. Unfortunately, they listen to other people in the household, if you know what I mean, that are totally, the antithesis of what I'm about, unfortunately. Right. So I get that kind of stuff going on, and but I try to keep positive, and I mention things to them now and then, and sometimes it makes sense to them, sometimes it doesn't. And I think, they all have a spark of me, of course, inside them. So they half of them knows, certain things that, I know what I'm trying to say. I know it's in them, and it'll come out with age. My oldest is 19. She's just starting to really come around. And then I have the next in line is 16.
Right.
And I see she's got a lot of Scorpio energy and the Sag, and she's an amazing artist. I mean, she doesn't. Oh my gosh, I think she's channeling that, because she just last night showed me a snowboard. She goes snowboarding all the time. She's real athletic, and Leo rising, and I think a lot of her Sag is in the 5th house of Leo.
Yeah.
So, I see that. Maybe I didn't before, but all of a sudden I'm seeing, okay, artist. Yeah, this is really coming out now, because she just drew her own design on the snowboard, just
cool.
Amazing design, like an Ed Hardy almost, but her own style, and it was really, really unbelievable. I thought, why don't you do this more often,
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, so anyway, but that kind of thing, they all have their own, they have a lot of artistic ability. The next one, who's going to be 13 on Christmas, she's real artistic too, and she's real spiritual. She's got the Pisces moon, and and I think she was born with Jupiter in Pisces. Anyway, so yeah, I see a lot of that. A lot of same qualities I may have are in them, But anyway,
I gotta say, you live a very interesting existence.
I mean,
do. It's like you've got a not so secret life. I think it's utterly fascinating how you have put yourself out there on the internet, and
I'm brave.
You are brave.
Aries moon, warrior moon. I sometimes I feel invincible. Like I don't really care if something. That's a terrible attitude, because I have children, but I feel like, well, I'm coming up on 50 already, and I guess, I don't know, life is short, and you got to do what you got to do, and just things are risky, so what, That's kind of the attitude I have. Yeah. I almost called in and talked to George just at the end, but then I chickened out. I don't know. I had emailed him a long time ago when I saw one of his Google videos. I can't remember what the email was about. This was like 3 years ago. But I'm sure it was something interesting, and I almost wanted to talk to him real quick about just certain things he was talking about. And because when he was talking about, he talked about everything. You asked some great questions, and so he was, all over talking about a lot of things. And anyway, I was going to mention something that I had seen, like a vision a long, long time ago, and if it has any relevance to what's going on today, because I never quite understood it. But it was, to me, what I was getting at the time was very, very much in the future. And I don't know if I was seeing some time travelers. I don't know. They were all guys, interestingly enough, at the time that I was seeing. And this was in a shopping mall, and I was not seeing what I was supposed to be seeing in the shopping mall. I was seeing something totally different. It was like a vision of this is the way these people do it, or whatever. I don't know what it was about, to tell you the truth. I was just, all I can say is I saw this was in 1980, and do you remember when was it the lightning bolt logo was popular? What was that? Like I want to say something with surfing or lightning bolt. It was like on shirts, guys' shirts.
Right. Yeah. Well, the lightning bolt is a symbol for the superhero Flash. The Flash.
I don't know if that was whatever it was in the 80s. It was real popular on shirts, on guys' shirts.
Okay.
You'd see them at the mall. Okay, so when I was at the mall and looking at little shops and stuff, just window shopping, the guys' clothes, whatever that I was coming upon in the windows, all of a sudden they had these really weird starburst insignias on them.
Huh.
Yeah, like the sun, or like, I don't know, Sirius or whatever it was. It was a big star. I was just seeing that, like it was like a vision of some sort, or I don't know if I was hallucinating or what it was,
Right.
And then I was seeing guys looking like surfer type guys, blonde hair, blue eyed, and they all looked alike, kind of like they were brothers type. They were wearing these shirts in the store, selling, or not really selling. They were like somewhere behind the register, somewhere, wherever. I don't know. I didn't see customers. I just saw the guys, and it was like it was like a vision, but it was like a message, and there were no words, and it was like something was telling me like there was no money being exchanged. It was all, and I don't know if it was gold, but I didn't see any physical gold.
Right.
And it was something to do with the symbol. It was like a light source. It was like, you know, where we are, we don't need money or something like that. It was just really strange. And it was like, and I walked out of the mall and I even felt this amazing light, like a light. And even inside the mall at the time, it was like everything was filled with light. And it was almost telling me like, it felt like something was telling me like, oh, you're really, really wealthy. You don't need money. It was really a weird message. I can't explain it.
Yeah.
But I thought I would share it for what it's worth. It's just, I thought, well, maybe this is a future message. I don't know.
Maybe it's a potential future. You know, maybe it's part of the timeline. You know. Hey, I have a quick question for you. Then somebody else is on the line. I want to talk to them. But do any of your girls read the books, The Hunger Games?
Somebody mentioned that to me, not them, but I think it was the girl who does my hair reads them, and I had never heard of them before. Yeah.
Yeah. Very interesting. I'm going to be doing a post on the Hunger Games pretty soon. Frank, Winter Dragon Frank, brought them to my attention, and utterly fascinating. These are a series of books for young teens, right?
Okay.
And
I didn't know. I thought they were for adults also.
Well, they could be theoretically, but the main characters are all teenagers.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah, and it's set in a post-apocalyptic America where there are these different zones.
Oh.
And the zones have to compete against each other with young people that are trained to face each other in what's called the Hunger Games, and their fights to the death.
Yeah.
And everybody has to watch. You have to watch these games. And I thought about, and I'm gonna explore this more, but I thought about how each generation, sort of like with Pluto and Scorpio, has its own like generational literary meme. So for like, Pluto and Scorpio, it would be Harry Potter, right?
Yes.
That's what they were raised on. It's occultic. It's kind of dark. It's magical. Lots of power. You know, so that's their sort of generational meme. Then it seems to me like the generational meme for this Pluto and Sag group are the Hunger Games, which are athletic, ideological, survival based. So I'm going to look into that more. I just thought maybe with your daughters you might have had kind of an insight into that.
Well, yeah, the oldest, who's 19, she's Pluto Scorpio, I guess at the very end of it. And then the next one, in like 16-year-old, is the very beginning of Pluto Sag. And then, of course, the last two are Pluto Sag also. But, yeah, well, it sure fits my 16-year-old, who's very athletic. I could see her liking that and relating to that. And
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Well, listen, Teresa, it's been lovely to hear your voice and catch up with you. And thanks for putting your Aries moon out there and calling in.
Okay, thanks for taking my call.
Okay,
Take care.
Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, so let's, I've got construction going on out in front of my house. I don't know if you can hear that or not. They're doing the studio. They're taking up the street. This will be on the 509 area code. They've been waiting on hold for about 12 minutes. Let's see what they want to talk about. Hey, you're on the air with Robert. Hello.
Hi, Robert. It's Judy Derns. How are you?
Hey, Judy. How's it going?
Oh, real good, real good. I was listening to the interview, a very good interview, by the way.
Thanks.
And it brought to mind a question. You said that you had that you keep your nose to the news and on the media and all of that kind of thing, just to kind of see what's out there and what's going on.
Yeah.
And I was wondering what your reaction was, and if you had noticed any major shifts in consciousness that came about around the 11/11 date. Because I have, and I wondered if maybe you've noticed the same thing that I had.
Well, yes, I have as well. And, for me, it's always, I start, it's weird. I mean, sometimes I start on the collective and work in, and sometimes I started the inside and worked out to the collective. I know for me personally that I felt a great sense of expansion on 11/11/11. Like, I felt like, you know what? This is great. I love my life. The planet's cool. Everybody else is really amenable. There was just a underlying sense of confidence, enthusiasm, and calm that I felt that day. And, you know, since that, you know, from a global perspective, I've been finding, Judy, that people's lives and their I guess their stuff, quote unquote, right? We have our stuff, right? I feel like people's stuff is getting diminished more, and more authenticity and more congruence are being demonstrated by people on a daily basis now. And my feeling about that is, and maybe it's a pre-11/11, post-11/11, but I've been feeling like for quite a while that we had been on this accelerated trip of really dealing with our baggage, dealing with our dysfunction, dealing with our thought forms, dealing with our misconceptions, dealing with what we do to keep getting in our own way. And a lot of that stuff was happening very quickly for many, many people. And I feel like, and this is my my perception, and I'll let you share yours. I feel like post 11/11/11 that process has really shifted, and we're not dealing necessarily with garbage. Now we're dealing with who we can be, how we can manifest ourselves more fully. That's the shift in consciousness that I'm experiencing. People are coming more online now.
Exactly. That's the up point. The thing that I noticed was a definite line that has been drawn between, for a better word, the reptilian forces. It's almost like black and white between, like what you were talking about before, the uplifting of the evolution of consciousness, and us letting go of the baggage and coming to know who and what we really are. And it's almost as if these reptilian forces are fighting against it and losing the battle. So,
well, I would, I would agree, because I think that, again, from a personal perspective, I know that, post 11/11/11, like the writing on my website has really taken off, right? I'm like tapping into places now that are really interesting from an energetic perspective. So if I'm like responding to that and resonating with that in a kind of an amplified mode, and for me it feels, for lack of a better term, light or lighter, then I can only imagine what somebody who would be holding the opposite charge would be feeling now, because maybe they're getting really stressed out and having to deal with sort of the maybe the hyperphysics of this in ways that they're just not prepared to do.
Exactly. Wow, that's cool. I'm glad to hear that someone else has kind of perceived this in the way that I have. That confirmation makes you feel a little better.
Well, and look, I really like George, right? I really do, and I like the information, and I agree with a lot of it too. I had this event happen to me one time when I was in my 30s. It was my late 30s, and I had this big van. It was this 1-ton van, and I traveled all around the country with this van. And then when I came back to California, I actually lived out of it for a while. And I was driving it. I just helped a friend move, and I was driving it home, and all of a sudden, my steering, I noticed my steering wasn't really working very well. And I would turn my wheel, and my van wouldn't turn that well. So I'm thinking, oh my God, what am I going to do? And I didn't really have a lot of money at the time, or I didn't really have a lot of options to to just park the van, have somebody, pick me up. So I decided, I had a dog in my car. It was my trusted companion. I decided I was going to finesse this thing home. And the route home was not an easy route. It was filled with hills and all kinds of stuff. Now, to make matters worse, I ran out of gas, right? So now I've got a car that won't steer and it's run out of gas. So I don't take that for, it's like, screw this. I'm gonna do something different. I'm gonna push the envelope. I'm gonna get this van down this hill, and I'm gonna coast down this one hill, and I'm gonna get to a gas station. I'll get some gas, and I'll try and drive it home. So I get the van up to the top of this hill, and it gets stuck on a curb, and some guy's driving by. This is about 11:30 midnight, and he helps me pop the van off the curb, and the door of the van is open, and I'm pushing on the door, and all of a sudden it pops over the curb and it just takes off. And now I can't get into the van. I can't use the brakes. And even if I got in, I probably wouldn't be able to steer the goddamn thing anyway.
Oh my God.
So I'm being literally, Judy, I'm being dragged along on the pavement by this van. And it's in a suburban area of Berkeley, a very nice area, nice homes. And I just say to myself, you got to let go of the van.
Yeah.
And it's like, you can't hold on to the van anymore. That van's history. I let go of the van, and I see the van flying down the street with my dog in the van. And I'm just like, I don't know where this is going, but there's nothing I can do about it, right? And all of a sudden, the van slams into this Honda, a nice Honda. And the Honda was parked next to a sign, a big metal sign with a pole telling you what time you could park there, when the street cleaning was coming, one of those signs in the sidewalk. My van slams into this Honda, T-bones this Honda, and smashes the Honda up against this big metal pole. So the Honda's accordioned. And my van stops. My dog jumps out of the van. Her alarm goes off. The people, this is where it gets very funny. The people who own the house that was right by the Honda, the lights go on in their house. Their door opens. My dog jumps out of the window of the van, runs into the house. Like, could you imagine those people? All of a sudden they hear they hear like a bomb going off. They open the door, and the dog comes running into their house. Right? So I come walking down the street. My leg is bloody. Oh my gosh, shit,
How are you going to explain this?
Well, yeah. So now what happens? This woman who owns the car, she comes walking down the street. She's this, Asian woman. I think she was Japanese. She turns, white as a ghost because her car has just been demolished, right? And she says, "Oh my God, my father just passed away. He just gave me that car."
Oh.
I'm like, So here's the weird part, right? So now the towing service comes, and they pull my van off her car. Cops come, they look, everything's cool. I got my license, I got insurance, everything's kosher. They put my car on the truck, and they actually got into her car, and they were able to open her door and start her car and drive her car off that sign. Everything about her car was fine. Like her engine worked, all the mechanical parts were fine. It was just these two doors. And I actually wound up driving back a couple months later, and I saw the same car. She'd had the doors fixed. So ultimately, everything kind of worked out for her. It was probably an inconvenience, and I'm sorry to that woman. But the reason why I'm telling you this story is because I feel like we're that van right now.
Right.
We just have to let go, and we don't know what's going to happen.
And trust in the outcome.
Yeah.
Trust in a good outcome. Yeah.
I mean, there was nothing I could do.
Yeah.
And my life was a little inconvenient, but it wasn't terribly inconvenient. Guess what? I had another car to drive the next day, and I drove that car for a good 3 to 4 years after that. So it all worked out. It all worked out fine. Funny story, Judy. I know that I'm not I'm not going to get that van back. Because it was totaled in the front.
There's a time when you just have to let go.
Yeah, so I'm with the guy who's taking the van away to basically, salvage it or whatever. Even though we hadn't talked about it, I said, "Hey, man, where are you going to take it to?" Well, I'm going to take it to this mechanic. Oh, great. Can you just give me a ride back to my house on the way? It's like, okay. So sure. Let me just get a few things out of that van.
Your life was in that van.
Exactly. So, I took about 5 minutes. I'm shuffling all this stuff out of the van, and that was it. That was the last I ever saw the van. And it was a great, great sturdy van. It gave me a lot of great adventures. But look, we got to let go sometimes. And as much as I like George and the information that he shares, I also believe that's not. I mean, look. Could it all go down like that? Sure, it could. Could it all be that hopeless? Yes, it could. But I just think that there is a level of awareness and kind of a radical nature to consciousness that can't always be accounted for. And that's the layer of faith that I work with in my own life.
I completely agree. Because we can see all of these things happening that he was talking about, but like you said, the outcome does not. The outcome is always very surprising because spirit works in strange ways.
I agree with you. And you just never know when these little, like for instance, I talked about this story the other day on the show. There was this old boy who was underwater in a pool for half an hour, and he lived.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yep.
A half an hour. And there was a model, this woman, she was a model. She got hit by the propeller of a plane. This was all within the last 72 hours.
I read something about that.
Yeah.
And she survived it.
Absolutely.
Yep.
So, we can't, as much as we'd like to believe that it's written in the Georgia Guidestones, right? Like written in stone, like the Georgia Guides. I don't think it always gets played out like that, No. Like I knew this guy. I studied, he was like a kind of a, what we'd call a Wasatchu shaman, right? He was a white shaman. He studied the native way. Good guy. And he got involved in Native American medicine and practice because he went through a trauma, and the trauma he went through that he was in the Vietnam War, and he told me this story which really shook the core and the foundation of his life. He was a helicopter pilot, and they were like air vacs. So he'd come in, guys would get down, they'd take him out, and they had to be very careful because sometimes the Viet Cong would ambush them. And he said he had this one experience where he came in and he flew in to get these guys, and he could see their faces. They were reaching their hands up, trying to, they were wounded, and the Viet Cong were laying in wait, and they were using them as bait to get the helicopters, right? And he said, I'll never forget this. So first, there were two things that happened. One is the Viet Cong fired on me at point blank range with a automatic rifle, and he said not one bullet hit the helicopter. And he said it was completely unexplainable. And the other thing that happened was that I had to fly out of there, and I'll never forget the look in that man's face.
And
So this is what So he had to deal with the mystery of why he survived, and the tragedy of why the other guy didn't. So the reason I brought that up is because these anomalies happen, and I'm a big proponent of creative chaos in these anomalies. That doesn't mean that we're not going to be staring down some heavy stuff, but I just don't think things are written as etched in stone as deeply as they are.
Exactly. I kind of perceive different realities as chords and pathways, and there's millions of them that you could take, and you don't always have to. I'll say, well, hey, I'm not going to go down that pathway. It's not going to happen, and it doesn't. You know, that may be just considered wishful thinking, but in my mind's eye, that's how I perceive these things.
Well, you know, Judy, what's interesting is that Jerry Hicks of Jerry and Esther Hicks just passed away, right? He just died.
Oh no, I didn't know that.
Yeah, he died about a week ago, and and I was into the Abraham stuff for a little bit. Not I wasn't an Abraham freak, but
no, me either. I've heard some of it, but no.
but one of the things that always made sense to me with Abraham in the material was they had this thing called forking off, right? That you would just you would just go to what felt good to you, right? And you would I
thought I came up with that.
So let's go back to your original question, right? So so the 11-11-11 stuff, right? So here's my take on it. My take on it is that since 11-11-11, it is easier for people to fork off, right? I mean, they can go to things inside themselves which simply feel good, and not good in an escapist sense, but in kind of a deep, rich, resonant sense. And they don't have there's not a lot of mind talk. There's not a lot of patterning that is getting in the way. So I think it's getting easier for people to say yes to things that feel really rich and resonant and rewarding inside themselves. And that's everything from relationships to lifestyle to whatever. I think that's where we are.
That is a beautiful way to put it. Absolutely beautiful.
So
thank you.
What are you going to do to fork off today, Judy?
I don't know. Probably nothing new.
Well, listen, you have a wonderful day. Always a pleasure to hear your voice, have you call in, and I know that you are one of millions and millions of people that are really doing very good, unpublicized work on a daily basis in your life, in the lives of your family, in the lives of those around you, and in my book, in my estimation, one of the true heroes. And there are millions of them out there. A lot of, the chat room is full of them, and so I want to recognize you on that level, Judy.
Well, thank you so much. That's quite a compliment, and thank you for your insight. I've really enjoyed the conversation, Robert. Have a good afternoon.
You too, Judy. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
That's our friend Judy Derns. Neat person. Okay, it's 11:51. A lot of snap and crackle and pop on the line today, which means we are not alone. So anyway, let's see. Let's get back to the weekends real quickly, and we'll round off the show here and say goodbye. Big day tomorrow, lunar eclipse. Full ring of fire, Uranus direct. Very interesting time. Tuesday, T-square, Moon in Cancer, just coming off the eclipse. Pluto in Capricorn, Uranus in Aries. 12/12, 12/13. From here, basically from tomorrow to like 12/13, very, 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 for lack of a better term, interesting space. Okay, so not terrible. Energy is energy, and it depends on how you roll with it, right? You can use energy to affect great change in your life if you can deal with it. And let me tell you, I'll tell you a quick story, and then we'll talk about next week's show, and then we're out of here. It seems like I'm talking about cars breaking down, but it's a Mercury retrograde, so I will share another car story with you. The car that I have now broke down. It broke down on Thanksgiving. A lot of you know that story. And within 24 hours, I had a replacement part. And the universe said, here, and I had to do, I had to jump through a few hoops, but, I'm driving around with a new car now. It's not new. Well, it's new to me, and it's great. And I didn't plan that. I didn't plan my car breaking down. I didn't plan getting this other car. None of it was planned. And what I was very clear of when this unfortunate event of mode of transportation. I'm a dad. I got a kid. I've got to drive him around. His school is 7 miles from my house. I just can't get up and, walk him to school or ride a bike. I guess I could ride a bike, but so I need that car. And, through the grace and the love of a friend, she was right there. She called me right afterwards. She knew of a situation where there was a car that was available, and that car is, sitting in front of my house. So the key to that for me, though, and I'll be honest with you, was I was very aware that I was going through a crisis with my transportation. But what I chose not to do is I chose not to take it personally. I chose to, at that time, do everything in my power to work with whatever resources that I had in order to deal with the situation and not look as though that car was the end of the world for me. I was suspending my judgment around how this was going to turn out. And trust me, that's not always easy to do. I think a lot of us are programmed to think the worst, like, this is the shittiest thing just happened to me. I can't believe this happened to me. Not only did I face the daunting challenge of not having a car, but in that moment, I had to deal with one of my worst critics, which was my ex-wife, because I was taking my kid to her house. And I have a history of being, a little on the latest side, sometimes with good cause, and sometimes because, well, I don't know. I am who I am. But so now I had to deal with her criticism, her judgment about the car not working, about not being to her house on time. I had to go through all of that, right? I had to go through the judgment that I would have when she would drive up in her car that would work with her fiance, and my kid getting into that car and them driving off, and me being here at the gas station waiting for a friend to pick me up so I can load my stuff just like I did with the van all those years ago, put it in his car and take off. And I did my absolute best to just be as present as possible and not allow this event to determine my life. And through the grace of God and through the kindness of friends, I have a car to drive. And I would like to think that my response to that event had something to do with it. So I'm sharing this story with you because we all have cars that break down in our lives. We have relationships that break down in our lives. We have societies and economies that break down in our lives. And none of them are going to be the end of the world. It might be the end of the world as you know it, but it won't ever be the end of the world. So keep that in mind and take it to heart that how you respond to life is absolutely critical. Do your best to live without fear and do your absolute best to not judge your circumstances because you never know how they're going to change, for better or worse. And, if you're on top of the world, that's a whole other conversation. Be respectful, be grateful, and, love and nurture that moment in your life. And love and nurture the moment where you're not in those places to the best of your ability. Nothing can touch you. Nothing can touch you when you approach life from exactly the same angle. Nothing. And that is where we are today with so much uncertainty in our lives and the lives around us. Okay. So let's see. Monday, we got the mashup, post-eclipse mashup. Wednesday, navigating the astrological matrix, 2 hours worth of post-eclipse notes. And then next Friday, Linda Kahanoff, author of The Tao of Equus and a number of other books that are deeply connected to the culture of the horse and what the horse means as a mythological and as a real creature, as a form of our consciousness, as a symbol, as a living symbol of our consciousness. We're going to talk about horses. We're going to talk about her work. And we're going to talk about the latest provision where they can now slaughter horses for their own. The slaughter of wild horses can take place. So Linda will be on the show next Friday. Okay. Thank you, George Green, for joining me. And thank you for everybody that called in and was in the chat room. You know the drill. Use your head to discern what's real, your heart to stay up on what's possible. Have fun with that eclipse this weekend. I'm Robert Phoenix, and you've been listening to the Friday Forecast.
We are living in a computer-programmed reality, and the only clue we have to it is when some variable is changed and some alteration in our reality occurs. We would have the overwhelming impression that we were reliving the present, deja vu, perhaps in precisely the same way, hearing the same words, saying the same words. I submit that these impressions are valid and significant, and I will even say this: such an impression is a clue that at some past time point a variable was changed, reprogrammed as it were, and that because of this an alternative world branched off.